Hello everyone, and welcome back to Fully Vetted. Here at Fully Vetted, our goal is to bring you the story behind the car. Corvettes are what bring us together, but it's the story that keeps us coming back for more. In this episode, we chat with Kevin Bright. Kevin has a great story about his 1958 Corvette, and we were honored to sit down with him and let him share that story. Before we get going on the interview, please remember to like, subscribe, and share this video. And if you think your car deserves to be the star of our next episode, by all means, send us an email. The link is in the description below. Keep in mind, we can't showcase everyone. Enjoy the show. So, as far as the story about this car, I understand that your dad has a lot to do with it, Kevin. Is that correct?
Everything.
Everything to do with it, okay.
Everything.
And tell me the story.
So he graduated high school in 1958.
1958, wow. So that's the year of this car.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And somebody came by in this car, and he had never seen it before. It was his first year out.
Oh, wow.
And he was just enamored by it. I guess it was the high school graduation, and somebody had come by, and he sat in it, and he's like, all right, someday. And so that's where it all started. The
Wow.
dream for the 58 Corvette started in 58. He saw it for the first time. So then throughout his life, he was a card guy. Didn't really know how to work on them, but just loved cars.
Right.
He was the kind of guy that you had to have a clean car inside and out. You could eat off of his engines. When you get in the car, he had towels down. We didn't take our shoes off necessarily, but he's like, don't touch the windows. No eating, absolutely no eating in the cars, and enjoy the day, right?
Yeah, so you never went to a hamburger drive-in in your car?
No, never. I don't even think we had a soda in the car.
Right.
Once in a while, we'd fog up the window and put a little smiley face and see if he caught it. He would run hot water into his garage in Idaho, and he'd wash his cars weekly, year-round, regardless of the weather.
That's pretty amazing.
And he just absolutely loved it. Would never take him out in the weather. I remember one time, it was probably 76, and I was probably 11, 12. He loved to play softball. He was in a men's softball league, and back in the day, he'd drag us everywhere to this softball. And so we'd go across the street and buy firecrackers and underneath the bleachers, have fun. Well, they had this one, it was called the Misfire or the Smoker. And I looked on it, and at the age of 12, I loved cars, and I could understand, you put it between the coil and the coil wire and the coil, you put it on the positive side, and it would arc it, and it would start smoking really bad. It would just light it. And so we's like, okay, he's way over there. I'm climbing up on top of this car. His beautiful Jimmy, oh man, if he would have seen me. And I'm trying to figure out the positive side of the coil. I'm trying to read the directions on that. And we were all excited. Time for the end of the day. And he comes back and he starts it, and it just crank. And he's like, that's not right. This is a beautiful car, fired up every time. And I was like, oh man, did I just ruin the car?
Uh-oh.
And everybody's, my two brothers are looking at me, and I'm like, oh no. And it didn't work because I didn't it just crank. So he popped the hood, and immediately he saw it. And he wasn't too happy. I was like, I was just trying to create a prank and get it to smoke. And everything revolved around him and his cars.
That's pretty awesome.
He was in parades in his little hometown in Idaho. I would go out and wash the cars with him. And when I say, it would be hours. And he would have the hood open, and he would be polishing, and I'm like, nobody does this.
Right.
I would tell him, Bright, nobody does this. You're the only one that does this. Doesn't matter. And he taught me how to wash the white walls with borax and powder, and he loved white walls. Every one of his car had white walls. And so that was a big deal to him. Had to have white walls, whatever it was.
Okay, so yellow is a thing with your dad.
Yeah, so when he finally gets ready to retire, calls me one day and he says, I'm ready to kind of get my final car of my life. And I was like, oh, that's pretty exciting. And so we looked at Prowlers, we looked at Crossfires, and I really loved the Prowler. And he said it only had a V6, he wanted a V8. And I'm like, we could put anything in the car. We could do it. No, and then he's like, I really want this Corvette. And he kept sending me pictures. This was in early 2000. He's like, I want to build this car like mine. He found one in North Carolina, looked a little long in the tooth. It ran, I'd say it was a 6, maybe a 5 out of 10. had a hard top. And he said, I really like this car. And I was like, I'm not sure. He's like, we need to go take a look at it. And I couldn't get away, but I had a really good friend up there, and he went and took a look at it, and he came back. He's like, man, you get it for the right price. It's a little long in the tooth, so you're going to have to do a lot of work to it. He picked it up for $43,000 in 2003.
Wow.
I wouldn't say that was a steal, but it was a pretty good deal. It had been clipped in the front, clipped in the back. Guy didn't know what he had. His wife hated it.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, it smelled like gas the whole time. It was a runner, but barely.
Barely, yeah.
So when I got the car, I had it media blasted. I sent it out, and it's little chewed up Lego pieces.
Oh, really?
That's all it is.
Huh.
Yeah, multiple colors, little plastic, and then they just hit it.
Is it the consistency of fine sand?
Yes.
Or? Okay.
And I liked that the original color was yellow, but back in the day, the yellow was so washed out.
Well, they didn't have clear coat back then.
Yeah, it was a single stage,
Yeah.
and it was really almost beige, very light.
Very light.
So color was a big deal, and I worked with my painter. That's the only thing I didn't do. I did all the body work, but I didn't paint it. And he got tired of me back and forth. I don't know. I'd have all these color swatches, and again, you'd physically go to the book and pick a color swatch. There was no real. There was, of course, the internet, and I was searching. He just finally took me down. He's like, you're going to pick a color. I need to start getting ready to prep and paint. So he opened it up, and he's like, there's your 3. That's all I'm going to give you. Pick one. And I picked the middle one, and it was a 1992 Toyota MR2.
Oh, wow.
So that's the actual color. It's a Toyota MR2.
I think this matches perfectly. I would never have known, unless you told me, that it was a color other than what the Corvette originally came in. Because to me, based on my eye and my knowledge of Corvettes, it looks
yellow.
very, very appropriate. So you spent a lot of time and effort on this car. What are the modifications that you did to it? Because I know it's not exactly
It's a resto mod.
It's considered a resto mod.
Yeah.
So tell me some of the things that you did to it that would call it a resto mod.
So when we first got it, we were all excited to keep it original. And I started looking into it, and it didn't have the original engine. So at that point, I just said to my dad, hey, game's on.
Yeah.
We're not going to keep this. It's not. We can't. I don't want to go try to force a number match on any of this. So let's just start with a fresh build. And I have some ideas.
Have fun.
I want to have a bigger engine. I want to have a reliable fuel system. We just went with the 350. I bored it out, 4-bolt main, bored it out 30 over. It's a 355. I put aluminum metal block heads on it. And so I had it all solid, brand new bottom end.
That's amazing. That's
new
amazing.
crank, rods, pistons. I have a pretty aggressive cam, although it doesn't really sound like it. I was a little disappointed in the cam. I thought it was a little bit more aggressive. Even my fuel injection tuner thought it was a little bit too aggressive. So then we took the heads, took them all the way down, flow tested them, port and polished them. We had all the equipment there, put it together and put it on the dyno. And it put out 335
Wow.
At the back of the crank in horsepower, and 355 in torque. It's
Nice.
real torquey.
Nice.
While the engine was going on, I took the Muncie transmission, and it's not a rock crusher. It's not a 21, but it's a 22. So I took it to the transmission class. I said, we're going to rebuild this. And I put all new internals in there with the students. And it was fun.
Yeah,
it really
I'm sure
didn't
it was.
need to be rebuilt. It looked great, but we put all the new shafts. I didn't change any gear ratios. I kept it all stock. The horsepower, it could easily handle it. Pretty heavy duty clutch, and the clutch is mechanical. Your leg shakes. So it was a pretty heavy.
That's that strong of a clutch.
It's a pretty heavy clutch, pressure plate and all that, but it was a really nice clutch. And then the same with the rear end. It was an open diff, one wheel peel, and I wanted a posi rear end. So again, I took that to that proper class, and I said, let's open this up and let's make this.
So you converted the original diff in this to a posi rear end. That's
and
amazing.
I had to shave the internals out quite a bit, and I'm a little worried about it.
Okay.
Holding up over time.
Okay.
Because it's a very small, I think it's an 8.5 inch. My diff was beefy diff. It bolted up, but it didn't fit. So these are like a pumpkin. You unbolt them you pull the whole housing out. So it was very easy to put in and out. I kept shaving until finally Things barely cleared, and I'm a little worried about it. I don't know how long it'll.
You haven't
driven it.
You haven't driven enough to find out, have you?
You know, we did the math on the gear ratios because, again, a build for my dad. He wanted to drive it freeway. His twin brother lived here in Bountiful, and again, he was up in Idaho, and he's like, I'm going to come down once a month, so I want to freeway drive this thing, and I don't want it to be hanging around $4,000 trying to get it here. And so I did the math, and it's a 323 rear end.
Oh.
Really. You'll smoke the clutch before you'll smoke the tires on this thing. It's so torquey though, easy to take off, but you're at 80 miles an hour hitting 4. So I've had it up, 110, and it's not safe. You're like, how come the tires aren't touching the road? How come I can't turn?
I think that's a common Corvette problem. It seems like they like to lift up that front end.
This thing wants to take off.
Yeah.
But it would roar. I'd hit 4th gear and just take the torque on this is
I can imagine.
It's giddy.
I can imagine.
And it sounds really rich, and it's got a beautiful throat. And I used factory glass packs. These are tubes, and they came from the era of the 50s and 60s. So I bought those and put them on. They're a little long, so it's not as loud as I want it to be. But anyway, this thing will roll and roll.
So how long did that whole process take you to get it to the point where the car was drivable?
8 years.
8 years. Wow.
Yeah, so the whole time he's all excited. He'd come and he lived here, I lived out east. He'd come and visit, and we'd get pictures taken, and we'd just look at stuff. He wanted, every one of his cars has brown interior.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of brown, but I don't know if black would be ideal either, but all of his cars have brown interior. And his one request was that it looks like a baseball glove. He was a catcher. His twin brother was a pitcher, and they played for BYU, and that was his love. He loved baseball more than anything. I sourced a local Amish family.
Oh.
And out east, the Amish are workers. They do metal work, woodwork, leather work, interior, automotive. Their little horse-drawn carriages have leather interior in them, and they're very proud of their work, and they do a great job.
That's amazing.
So I took the seats, and I picked out the leather, and I had them do them.
That's awesome.
And
that's
so
awesome.
They're custom made from a
custom-made Amish
little
Corvette.
Amish family who did leather. Beautiful work.
So how much time did your father get to enjoy this car?
Not long.
Not long? Tell us that story.
It's pretty, it's sad. I really feel sorry for him because he just wanted this more than anything. And he wasn't pushing me on time. I had my regular career. I would work on it almost every night. My wife did not. And on the weekends, that was probably 3-4 years, about half of the time. And most of it was the body work. You know, my dad would come out once a year, once every 2 years, and we'd go look at the car and sit in it. And I had the seats in my office. And one of the cool things is I redid the entire dash, and I took it all apart and I repainted it to spec, and I changed over the tachometer from mechanical, and I changed that over to digital. But the face and the needles are all exact. So half the time in my office was the smallest of pieces, and I'm painting and
don't touch that.
Don't move that. And you know, I reset the odometer, so it's got 3,200 odd miles since its build. He calls me up and he's like, "Hey, I want to come out and pick up the car." And I was like, "No, that wasn't the plan. I was going to ship it to you. I'm done with it." He's like, "Oh, I want to come out and drive it." And I was like, "It's winter." And I found that very odd. At first, I was like, "We're going to ship this to you, and you're going to drive it in the spring. That's the plan." Snow falls and melts in April. It's now November. And I was driving the car. I drove it in the high school parade, which is a mistake. I'll never take another car in a parade. I burned up the clutch and had to redo the clutch. And I had the king and queen on the back. It was a cool look. My daughter was really proud of that. So that was fun. And then he shows up middle of November. It was really cold. It was windy. And I went up, took him to get the car. It was at a storage facility. And I said, "It's yours." He's like, "Can I drive it home?" And I'm like, no, this thing doesn't have 500 miles on it yet. We still have to break it in and worry about things. I had problems with the manifolds. The gaskets leaked. And so, you know, the things that you want to fix.
Sure.
Because he doesn't know how to fix it. We picked up the car. He drove it for about 15 minutes. Cried. He loved it. It was the best moment. I'm telling you, it was the best moment.
I can imagine.
That moment will forever live with me. He trembled as he touched it.
Really?
He got emotional. Poor guy. So we drove it, top up. He's like, this is my dream. It's my dream come true. And I was so proud.
Yeah.
Every bit of those hours gone. You know, there were times where I was cursing this thing. I was tired of it. It was affecting my life, you know, but all that was gone.
Right.
When he said how proud he was.
Yeah, amazing father-son moment.
So we get in and first thing he says, wow, this clutch is heavy. And I'm like, don't be a pansy. Let's go. And he would take it easy. And I'm like, no, go. This thing will go. And he got on it and he was just like, it's too powerful. I'm like, come on, you're fine. And when we got on the freeway and I'm like, roar, we're getting it up there. And he was just like, wow. Then we started driving it around in the town and he complained about the clutch. I'm like, just pop it in neutral. Everything, it's all brand new. There's no problem. It's just built because it's built. So we get back and another great moment. He thanked me. He just words. He had trouble finding words. So he said, I want you to put a hydraulic clutch in it and I'll pick it up in the spring. And I'm like, no, that's 3 more months of my time plus about $1,000. He's like, doesn't matter. Let's put a hydraulic clutch in. And he goes, I want air conditioning. And I said, no. He's like, no, that's what I want. So, and I said, I don't think I'm going to put AC in it. Next thing I know, the AC kit shows up at my house. One of those really nice
Like vintage air.
Vintage air.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I still have it.
Do you? How much
Yeah.
you want for it? Will it go on my? Will it go on mine?
I don't know. I found it to be kind of cheesy, the plastics. And
Oh, really? Interesting.
I wasn't impressed with it. I started to do it, so I cut out the panel and I mounted it. And then I'm like, what am I doing? This is dumb. You don't put AC in this car necessarily.
Right.
I don't mind AC. So I drug my feet on it. And then what he had done that I didn't know about, he had known at that time he was terminal.
Oh.
And you know how every Christmas was easy, every birthday was easy. Go online and find anything Corvette.
Mm-hmm.
He had a leather jacket. That's what he's wearing in the picture. He had a duffel bag. He had towels, he had blankets, he had knickknacks every year. He brought that all with him
Oh, wow.
and gave it to my wife and said, don't say anything to Kevin. And she's like, how?
Yeah.
What are you doing? He's like, I'm happy. I'm good.
I'm good. Yeah.
I'm not taking the car home. I didn't know. So that spring came and he kept talking about the clutch. And I'm like, I'm not going to do the clutch. I was thinking about it. I got all the specs to it. And then I got busy. And then he got sick. Autoimmune disease, blood clots in the kidneys, and they couldn't
Wow.
get rid of him. And he ended up in the hospital, and he was in the hospital. And it got worse. It got worse. It got to the point where he couldn't get out of the hospital. And then my wife couldn't take it anymore, and she
told you.
showed me all the
Yeah.
stuff. And then I was mad.
That's sad.
I was mad. I was
Yeah.
like, why didn't you tell me? He's like, I don't want to even talk about it.
Yeah.
You've given me my dream.
Right. That's an amazing story.
My dream's fulfilled.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need anymore. You keep the car, and I can't. And
Yeah.
it never left.
That's an amazing story.
Never left.
Amazing.
And so I don't have the air in it, and I didn't put a hydraulic clutch in.
There you go.
Side note, when he died, we hauled him to the cemetery in the back of his truck.
Oh, really?
That's
pretty
that's
awesome.
what he wanted. He loved his cars. And my brother, who's the executor of the estate, he's like, no, he wants you to have that. It was in his will. But I was willing to, I have 2 other brothers, let's sell it. Whatever you want to do, split it equally. And they're like, heck no. And this has been a wonderful blessing in my life. I don't fit in it. I'm too tall. I feel like a clown. I look over the top. Honestly, when I drive it, I take the lower cushion out.
Oh, really?
And there was a moment where I was going to cut the fiberglass out and lower the back on a spring so I could sit down.
Oh, really?
And then the seat would still be there. Because I take the seat out to drive.
Uh-huh.
Then I feel normal.
Right.
It's a Tom Cruise car. Was he 5'6"?
Yeah.
5'7"?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know, 5'8".